She was barefoot, shivering, and invisible to most, but when she lifted her hands toward the arrogant millionaire in prayer, something happened that no one could explain. He had laughed at her, mocked her broken voice, and walked away with pride in his stride. Yet later that same day, the man who had everything fell to his knees in tears, overwhelmed by a presence he couldn't describe. And it all began with the prayer of a homeless girl whose name he didn't even ask. Asterisk on the corner of 8th and Roland, where the downtown noise never really stopped, sat a girl whose presence seemed more like a shadow than a person. Her name was Amira, 16 years old, dark skin smudged with dust, her clothes torn and layered, more for modesty than warmth. She hadn't eaten since the night before last, and even that was a half sandwich left in a trash bin behind a cafe. But her eyes, those big, hopeful eyes, still sparkled with something people couldn't quite name. Every morning she stood outside the towering glass building known as Vandemere Financial Tower, hands clasped, eyes closed, silently praying for the people who walked by. Not for herself, never for herself. She prayed for them, for the suits, the heels, the joggers, the interns. Some noticed. Most didn't, but one man did. And he didn't like it. Asterisk Cole Vandemere was everything the city loved to hate: young, handsome, rich, and unapologetically arrogant. At just 35, he had taken over his father's billion-dollar empire and doubled its worth. He drove a matte black sports car that turned heads, wore suits that cost more than most people's rent, and held boardroom power like a king among peasants. But behind his tailored image was a deep bitterness, hidden under years of pressure, betrayal, and secrets no one dared mention. That morning, as he exited the building with 2 assistants in tow, he spotted Amira. She was praying again, right at the base of his tower like she did every morning. Eyes closed, hands together, lips moving without sound. Something about it irked him. Who was she to stand here and pray like she had something to give? He walked past her, sneering. "You should pray for yourself," he said coldly. "God doesn't take investment advice from beggars." Amira opened her eyes and looked up at him. She didn't flinch or cry. She just smiled softly and said, "I already did." "He said you needed it more." Asterisk Cole turned around sharply, as if stung. He wasn't used to being spoken to like that, especially not by someone so beneath him in his mind. But it wasn't the words that struck him, it was her tone. Calm, certain, not an ounce of sarcasm or fear. Her eyes met his again, wide and unbothered, like she had seen deeper into him than he was ready for. He scoffed. "You don't know anything about me," he muttered, more to himself than to her. His assistants exchanged uneasy glances. They had never seen Cole engage with a homeless person. He barely engaged with most people unless it served a purpose. But today, something felt off. Amira shrugged gently, pulling her thin jacket tighter around her. "Maybe not," she replied, "but I still pray for you, mister." Cole laughed dryly. "Save it. I don't need your prayers." Then he walked off, slipping into the back seat of his waiting black car. Inside the luxury vehicle, insulated from the cold and noise, Cole tried to brush the encounter away like dust on his shoulder. But her voice echoed louder than the engine's hum. "I already did." He said you needed it more. It annoyed him. It lingered. It made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't name. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and muttered under his breath, "Crazy girl." Back on the sidewalk, Amira watched the car drive off. Her stomach rumbled, but she ignored it. She had learned how to push hunger down, like folding pain into prayer. Every morning, she prayed with intention. Not for riches, not for rescue, but for souls. Because something inside her told her that people like Cole Vandemere, people with everything, were sometimes the most lost. What she didn't know was that Cole had a secret. One that money couldn't fix. One that followed him like a shadow, pressing down on his chest when he tried to sleep at night. Cole arrived at the office, brushing past his assistant Jenna without his usual nod. She paused, noticing his distracted eyes. "Morning, sir," she said. "Everything all right?" "Fine," he answered too quickly. "Just a lot on my mind." Jenna didn't push. Cole wasn't the type to open up. By noon, Cole sat at his desk, staring blankly at his computer screen. Numbers, projections, deals, all of it blurred. He had an investor call in 15 minutes and a charity gala in the evening, but his mind kept wandering back to the girl outside, something about her face. That strange piece. His phone buzzed. A message from his doctor. "Call me as soon as possible. Results are in." His throat tightened. For months, Cole had ignored the headaches, the fatigue, the weight loss. He told himself it was stress, that billionaires didn't get sick. But 2 weeks ago, a collapse in his penthouse forced him to run some tests. He hadn't told anyone. He grabbed his phone and stepped into his private office, locking the door. "Dr. Langley?" he said as the call connected. The doctor's voice was calm but serious. "Cole, we need to talk. It's what we suspected. The scans show signs of glioblastoma, advanced." Cole's breath caught. "Brain cancer?" There was a long pause. "I'm sorry." Cole sat in silence long after the call ended. The word glioblastoma echoed in his skull like a curse. He had heard it before. His uncle died from it within months. The same confident man who used to bench press 300 pounds had forgotten his own name by the end. And now that same fate was written into Cole's DNA, into his cells, into his timeline. He set the phone down slowly and looked out the wide, floor-to-ceiling window of his office. The city stretched out before him, busy, pulsing, endless. And yet for the first time, it all looked so small. Everything he had built, his net worth, his reputation, his power, none of it could buy him more time. He thought about calling someone. But who? His father was dead. His mother lived in a villa in Greece, more interested in art and spa days than anything real. He had colleagues, sure, and exes who clung to his last name like a badge, but no one he truly trusted. No one who would sit with him in a hospital waiting room and hold his hand. No one who even knew he was scared, and that's when it happened. He remembered her. That girl. Myra. Those soft eyes, that voice, that prayer. "I already did. He said you needed it more." Cole stood abruptly and walked to the mirror in the bathroom attached to his office. He stared into his reflection like he didn't recognize himself. There was fear in his eyes, raw and trembling. He hadn't cried in years. Not when his dad died. Not when he lost his best friend in college to an overdose. But now the tears came slowly and without warning. He slid to the floor, knees pulled to his chest, and sobbed quietly. Not like a CEO, not like a billionaire. Like a boy, alone, terrified, human. That evening, Cole skipped the gala. He told his assistant he had a migraine. Then he asked his driver to take him home, but halfway there, he changed the route. "Take me back downtown," he muttered. "Sir?" "To the tower, where that girl is. Just go." The driver didn't ask questions. Cole paid him too well for that. When they arrived, the streets were quieter, bathed in golden streetlights. The usual crowd had thinned, replaced by the soft hum of the city preparing for night. And there she was, sitting on the same piece of cardboard, wrapped in her thin coat, head bowed in prayer. Cole stepped out of the car, leaving the door open. His polished shoes tapped against the pavement as he approached her. Slower this time. Hesitant. Uncertain. She looked up and blinked. "Surprised to see him. You came back," she said simply. He nodded. "Yeah, I needed to talk to you." Amira gave him a gentle, almost maternal look. "You look different." "I got some news today," he said. "Bad news." She didn't flinch. Didn't ask what it was. Instead, she said softly, "Do you want me to pray for you again?" He hesitated. pride and fear at war inside his chest. Then he sat down, right there on the sidewalk next to her, his $1,000 pants brushing against grit and old gum stains. "Yes," he whispered, "please." And for the second time, Amira closed her eyes, lifted her face to the sky, and began to speak words that weren't just words. They were comfort. They were courage. They were connection. She didn't ask for healing. She asked for peace. She didn't beg for miracles. She thanked the universe for love, for light, for whatever time was left. And as her voice moved through the cool night air, Cole wept silently, because for the first time in years, someone had spoken to his soul. The next morning, Cole woke up not in his penthouse but in his car, parked a block away from Vandemere Tower. His coat served as a makeshift blanket. He had dozed off after hours of sitting in silence, staring out at the sidewalk where Amira had been. When he returned to the car the night before, he couldn't bring himself to go home. The silence of his high-rise felt heavier than the streets. His assistant Jenna called him 3 times that morning. He ignored each one. Cole wasn't thinking about meetings or contracts. He wasn't thinking about the press, the firm, or his image. He was thinking about how a girl who had nothing offered him more comfort in 10 minutes than anyone in his circle had in years. Around 9:30 a.m., he spotted her again. Amira had returned, standing tall despite her thin frame. Her eyes were closed, and she was murmuring prayers to the rhythm of traffic and city life. This time, Cole didn't hesitate. He approached her slowly, careful not to startle her. "Good morning," he said gently. She opened her eyes and smiled. "Back again?" He nodded. "I don't know why, but I needed to be here." Amira sat down and patted the spot beside her. "Then sit. I saved you a spot." He chuckled despite himself. Something about her humor disarmed him. He sank down beside her, still in his pressed suit, his tie loosened, hair tousled from sleep. She handed him half of a bagel, wrapped in a napkin. "I saved this too," she said. He stared at it for a moment, then accepted it with quiet reverence. "Thank you." They sat together for a while, eating quietly. He watched people rush by, just as they always had, oblivious to the life he had started to see. He no longer saw the sidewalk as a place of shame. He saw it now as sacred because it was where he first felt real peace. After they finished eating, Amira turned to him. "What are you going to do now?" He hesitated. I don't know. My whole life, I thought success was about money, about domination. But now I'm facing something I can't buy my way out of. The doctors gave me 6 months. Amira looked up, blinking. "I'm sorry," he nodded. "Yeah, me too." "Then maybe," she said carefully, "you should spend those months doing something different." "Like what?" "Like healing something other than your body," she whispered. "Your heart, your soul. The parts that were hurting long before your body ever did." That afternoon, Cole did something he never imagined. He returned to his office, called a full board meeting, and announced that he was stepping back. Temporarily, but immediately. "I need to take care of myself," he said. "Not just my health, but everything else I've been neglecting." His board members were stunned. One even tried to argue. But Cole didn't flinch. For once, he didn't feel the need to defend himself. He simply walked out of the room, exhaling for the first time in years. He spent the next few days wandering parts of the city he used to avoid. Food shelters, soup kitchens, parks filled with tents. He didn't go to judge or to pose for photos. Went to listen. And to learn. And Amira was his guide. Each morning, she showed up. Sometimes with bread. Sometimes with just a smile. She walked him into parts of life he had been too proud to see. She introduced him to people with stories real. Stories, hard ones who still held on to hope. She taught him how to be quiet, how to share, how to give with no expectation of return. Cole started buying meals for strangers. Not as a gesture of charity, but of connection. He started remembering names, asking questions, leaving his phone turned off, and day by day, something began to shift in him. The anger he carried, it began to lift. The guilt, it softened out the loneliness, it loosened its grip. He wasn't healed, but he was healing. One evening, about 3 weeks after their first real conversation, Amira didn't show up. Cole waited for hours at their usual spot. When the streetlights flickered on and she still hadn't come, panic rose in his chest. The next morning, he searched the blocks she usually passed. Nothing. He asked around at shelters, food lines, bus stops. No one had seen her. Some people didn't even know who she was. He returned to the tower, sat alone on the cardboard she had once used, and whispered the prayer she had prayed for him. Let there be light, even in the shadows. And then, as if drawn by the words, he heard a soft voice behind him. You remembered it? He turned. There she was, but something was different. Amira looked pale, weaker. She was holding her side. I'm sick, she admitted. Didn't want you to see me like this. He stood and rushed to her. What happened? An infection. I've had it for a while. Thought I could beat it. Cole didn't hesitate. He helped her into his car and took her straight to the private hospital where he received his own diagnosis. For once, he wasn't thinking about image. He didn't care what the nurses thought. All that mattered was getting her help. As they wheeled her into a room, she gripped his hand. Don't leave, she whispered. I won't, he said. You saved me. Now let me do the same for you. As Cole barely left Amira's hospital room for 3 days. He moved meetings, canceled dinners, ignored his lawyer's repeated calls about urgent estate matters. The world outside could wait. For once, Cole Vandemere had nothing more important than one frail girl lying on a hospital bed, fighting an infection that had spread too far, too fast. Amira had always looked fragile, but now, with 4 lines running into her arms and her breath sometimes hitching between sentences, she looked almost transparent. And yet, her spirit remained solid. She still smiled. She still thanked the nurses. She still whispered prayers in the dark. You ever think about dying? Cole asked quietly one night, sitting beside her, his hand wrapped around hers. Amira blinked slowly, then turned to him. I think about living, every day. Dying it happens. But living, that's the choice. Cole nodded, but his throat tightened. He had built empires, negotiated with billionaires, closed impossible deals. But nothing in his entire life had prepared him for the feeling of watching someone he loved slip through his fingers. And yes, he had grown to love her, not romantically, not in the way his past flings had taught him to define it, but deeply, purely, reverently. She was his mirror, his teacher, his anchor in a world he once floated above. He loved her with the kind of love that demanded no reward. Just presence, just purpose. The next morning, a doctor entered with a clipboard and a tight smile. She's stable for now, he said, but we can't keep her on this floor forever. We'll need to discuss insurance, coverage. I'll pay. Cole interrupted. The doctor blinked. It's not just about cost, Mr. Vandemere. This hospital doesn't typically house uninsured patients long term. We can try to. I said I'll pay, Cole repeated, firmer. For the room, the doctors, the surgery, whatever she needs. Bill it directly to me. The doctor cleared his throat, nodded, and left without another word. Amira watched the exchange from her bed and said softly, You can't buy everything, you know. I'm not trying to buy it, he said. I'm just trying not to lose what little time we might have left. She smiled, a weak but luminous smile. Then don't waste it being afraid. That afternoon, Cole made a call not to his doctor, not to his boardroom, but to a lawyer. He arranged for an emergency amendment to his will. Half of his personal fortune, nearly $120 million, was to be placed in a new foundation. one dedicated to transitional housing, mental health, spiritual healing, and education for homeless youth. He named it the Amira Grace Foundation. When the lawyer raised an eyebrow, Cole looked him dead in the eye. "She's the reason I woke up. She gave me something no one ever gave me: peace. This isn't charity, it's debt repayment." The next week passed slowly. Amira had good days where she told him stories about her mother who died when she was 11, about a poetry book she lost in a shelter raid, about the church she used to sit outside just to listen to the hymns. And then there were the bad days, the ones with high fevers, painkillers, and her hand going limp in his for hours. And then came the night. Cole had dozed off in the chair next to her bed, holding her hand as always, when he felt her squeezed out his. Eyes snapped open. She was staring at him, her voice barely audible. "I'm tired, Cole." "I know," he whispered. "You can rest." She blinked slowly. "But not until I say one more prayer." He shook his head, eyes brimming. "You don't have to, Amira. You've done enough for me." But she smiled again softly, like candlelight. "I want to," she said, and with her last bit of strength, Amira whispered a final prayer, not for herself, but for him. For the man who used to walk above the world. Thank you for teaching him how to kneel. For the man who forgot how to feel. Thank you for helping him remember. Let his life now be light for others. Let his name mean healing. Let his legacy be grace. Her voice faded, her eyes closed, and just like that, she was gone. Cole didn't cry right away. He sat there frozen, holding her hand long after it had gone cold. The silence in the room was deafening, and yet there was peace. Real peace. The kind you don't beg for. The kind that only comes from letting go. The hospital room stayed quiet for a long time after Amira passed. The machines were silent, the monitors shut off. A nurse came in to confirm what Cole already knew, her eyes kind and apologetic. But Cole didn't move, not until the sun broke through the window and spilled its warmth across Amira's still face. Then, and only then, did he rise, gently brushed her curls back from her forehead, and whispered, "Thank you." In the following days, something shifted in the city. The headlines read, "Billionaire Cole Vandemere steps away from fortune to build Hope Foundation. Mysterious girl at the center of multi-million-dollar charity movement." From boardroom to shelter, the CEO who was changed by a prayer. But Cole didn't give interviews. He didn't show up on stages or pose for cameras. Instead, he spent time on the streets, not in secret, not for applause, but because that's where Amira had taught him to see people. He went back to every corner she had once stood on, telling anyone who would listen about the girl who prayed for a stranger and healed a man with nothing but her presence. He helped open the first center of the Amira Grace Foundation 6 months later, just a few blocks away from the glass tower that once defined his empire. It wasn't a cold shelter. It was a place with beds that looked like bedrooms, warm meals served on real plates, soft music playing in the halls. Every room had a name, and one of them was called the prayer room, a quiet space with cushions on the floor and a stained glass window depicting a single girl looking toward the sky. Every morning, Cole walked the halls. Before anyone else arrived, he greeted the residents by name, remembered birthdays, and listened to stories he used to avoid. He had not been miraculously healed. His diagnosis hadn't vanished. But somehow he felt more alive than he ever had in his years of youth and wealth. And something else happened. Too, his symptoms, once so aggressive, began to slow. His doctor called it unusual. He called it grace. 1 year after Amira's passing, Cole organized a small memorial service in the garden behind the foundation's main building. The sun filtered through trees as children, former street kids, read poems and sang soft songs. In her memory, Cole stood before them, not in a suit, but in the plain gray sweater and jeans. No podium, no notes. Just a single red rose in his hand and a crack in his voice. I once laughed at a girl who offered me a prayer, he said. And then I cried in her arms when I realized she had given me more than anyone else ever had. Her name was Amira. She had nothing, but she gave everything. And that changed everything. He laid the rose down beneath a stone plaque that read, "In memory of Amira Grace, the girl who prayed for a man who had it all and taught him what it meant to have a soul." The crowd stood in silence. Some wept, some closed their eyes and whispered quiet prayers of their own. Cole didn't. Stay on the stage. He walked down, back into the crowd, hugged an old man in a worn jacket, handed a toy to a child with untied shoes, and sat beside a young woman holding a newborn listening to her story. Not because he had to, but because that's what Amira would have done that night. Cole walked the city alone. The streets no longer felt like borders between classes, but veins of a body he now belonged to. He passed buskers playing guitars, smelled the spice of food trucks, watched a young girl hand a jacket to a shivering boy. At one point, he sat on a bench outside the tower where it had all begun. And for a moment, he could almost hear her voice beside him. Don't waste it being afraid. He looked up at the sky, no longer searching for signs, just thankful. Not for money, not for legacy, not even for time. But for the prayer of one homeless girl, and the miracle she left behind in a man who never knew he needed saving. If you've ever been touched by a stranger's kindness, share their name below. Because sometimes, the smallest soul leaves the biggest light behind.